It's papaya on top as McLaren secures the Constructors' Championship in Abu Dhabi, and in a race with plenty of stories, there are only two real winners. The obvious one is McLaren, whose loyalty and faith in Lando Norris and risk taken on Oscar Piastri has been repaid in droves with a first Constructors' Championship in 2.5 decades. And the other winner who will stay winning into next season is the fans. We've been treated to an incredible year of racing, with more storylines and controversy than entire decades being witnessed in a single year. The only thing more exciting than 2024's F1 season is the fact that 2025 is set to be an absolute classic. However, the hopes of one team remain in the balance, as not only are they going to be dealing with a one-sided driver lineup, but they'll be doing so with their star driver making more and more enemies. Well, regardless of how bad it gets, we're sure that some, not all, of Max Verstappen's fans will excuse him for just about anything at this point. Want to know why 2025 could be the year that pushes the grid over the edge against Max Verstappen? He's making himself public enemy number one, and if Red Bull failed to give him a good car, we could be set for his angriest year in Formula 1 to date. And stick around, because he'll be fighting next year alone, if the declarations by his teammates are anything to go by. Max is really in the habit of making enemies, isn't he? It's not necessarily a new thing for him, nor is it something he cares about for as long as he's winning, but it really does seem that going into the 2025 season of Formula 1, Max Verstappen is going to be public enemy number one, and he may not even have a teammate capable of backing him up in these fights. We'll get onto the latter point later on, but for now let's discuss just how big of a grave Max Verstappen is digging for himself to lay in moving forward. In a rare turn of events, Max Verstappen was involved in a collision that didn't actively benefit him at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Don't get me wrong, the move was initiated out of the desire to gain positions, but the fact that he went for a move on the inside without benefiting from it is quite the rarity. Don't get me wrong, he still came off better than Oscar Piastri, who was shunted to the back of the field following the Turn 1 incident, but it wasn't the vintage I win either way move that we're used to seeing from Max. Piastri was quick to throw some pretty dry quips over in Verstappen's direction over the radio, with him claiming that the now four-time world champion's move wasn't necessarily befitting of a man with the titles. However, he later claimed that Max apologized to him after the race. Now, given Norris finished P1 and secured the constructors ahead of Ferrari, the damage done by the Turn 1 shunt will soon be forgotten. It is the end of the season after all. However, imagine that things didn't go quite so smooth for Norris. A stuck wheel at a pit stop, an unfortunate safety car, or sudden engine failure. Verstappen's kamikaze tactics could have cost a team a championship. Luckily for all parties involved, aside from the drama channels who'd be foaming at the mouth if this were to happen, we aren't living in that timeline, but Verstappen's list of enemies is still at an all-time high. There's a sense of fatigue in regards to how Max has conducted himself, with his cocky rant over the radio generating some eye-rolling in the commentary booth by Martin Brundle. After serving his 10-second penalty for shunting Oscar Piastri and ruining his race, a penalty which pales in comparison to 10-second stop-go penalties, which have made a resurgence in recent weeks for far less egregious crimes, Max had this to say: "Could we ask for 20 seconds? Stupid idiots." To which Martin Brundle retorted, "You can't say that about the referees. You can't say that, that's just not fair. They are applying the regulations. Don't run into other people, then you won't get the penalties." Given his championship rival faced a far more severe penalty for failing to slow under yellows at a time where the race should have been safety carred without cussing the officials, Max's comments look all the more childish and petulant. He now has 8 penalty points which will remain into the 2025 season, putting him within 4 of a race ban, and he can make as many jokes about a ban being a paternity leave or break, but the points serve as a reflection of some pretty dirty racecraft. Next year looks set to be an absolute worldie, with 4 teams vying for race wins and potentially championships being all but guaranteed, and a 5th can even sneak in with some McLaren-esque development over the winter, so there will be more and more opportunities for Max to gain more points by having to fight on his own with his back against the wall. If Red Bull fail to provide him with another once-in-a-generation car, we are likely to see Max at the center of more controversies and incidents, likely caused by his trademark overtaking methods. His style of driving and general character was called into question in a very public way by head of the GPDA and Mercedes driver George Russell, which led to quite the preview of an ugly Red Bull versus Mercedes storyline between their number one drivers next season. Russell has taken a brave, if foolhardy decision by being a driver who speaks out against Max without a direct incident occurring, with him saying Max has been enabled because nobody has stood up to him. He cannot deal with adversity. He slams his whole team and loses the plot. And according to David Coulthard, George has made a respectable but potentially costly decision to speak against Max, as he has put a spotlight on their personal disagreement that will be settled in one way and one way only: on the track. George is obviously consciously willing to say what he feels, and I respect that, but the war of words will ultimately be decided on the racetrack. Their spat is brilliant for the F1 product. From a show point of view, it is much more interesting when people aren't always seeing eye to eye. It generates interest and talking points, but the bottom line will always be the race. It will always be the checkered flag. A bit like boxers giving pre-fight press conferences and doing all the trash talking, they know it's part of the show, but the most important thing is who's still standing at the end of the bout. Red Bull have always been a team that enjoys going against the grain and rubbing people the wrong way, but the lack of solid machinery for the majority of this year and reliance on a man who just keeps getting in hot water is only adding to the pressure cooker in Milton Keynes. Either way, it all seems like it could continue to get more and more ugly for Red Bull, both on track and behind the scenes. A man walking away from Abu Dhabi with a pretty big cloud over his future is Sergio Perez, with poor fortune rendering him incapable of redeeming any credibility after a dismal season. While he certainly could not have made up for his poor performances which cost his team the constructors, he could have at least gone out with some credence or end-of-season momentum to put a stamp on his seat for the next season. However, the lap 1 incident put close to that. Before you say he has a contract, he's not going anywhere, I wouldn't be too sure, as according to Perez, there are going to be some very difficult discussions in the days ahead. After facing questions about him resigning in the media pen while the race was still going, Perez made sure to say that he won't go unless he is pushed. Well, at the moment, I don't know. I just know I've got a contract to race next year. Unless something changes in the coming days, that's going to be the situation for next year. I think at the moment, all I can say is I've got a contract that I signed in the middle of the year to race for the team for the next 3 years. So we'll see what happens and how the conversation goes in the coming days. Like I say, we're going to be talking in a couple of days. We will discuss what the situation is for both parties and see if we're able to reach an agreement. Like I say, I've got a contract for next year. And following comments earlier in the weekend from Red Bull team boss Christian Horner, where he claimed that giving Sergio the contract didn't work in regards to turning his form around, the conversations as to whether Sergio will see that contract out are going to be anything but smooth. The rumors about termination clauses which could be triggered by points totals will now be open to Red Bull, as we're pretty sure that a near 300-point deficit to his teammate, costing the team the constructors, isn't going to fulfill any clauses which may exist. However, Sergio's confidence that his contract is still valid points to that maybe not being the case. No matter whether it's Perez sitting in the Red Bull seat or not, Max Verstappen faces another season of fighting pretty much alone at the front, unless a miracle occurs and he has a teammate which can come close to matching him in Red Bull machinery. And quite frankly, he's giving himself more of an uphill battle for every enemy he makes, which is seemingly a list being added to at every possible opportunity. Thank you for watching.